All right, so here we are. I'm doing my second solo interview. You just did one recently with Kim.
Yes.
And you actually are part of the beginning of the story. Do you remember we're at the U of I Ohio State football game? I saw Scott get his jersey retired.
Yes.
And I thought he obviously must remember me from high school 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And you laughed then as you're smirking at me now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm so grateful that I sent him that text because he's got just an amazing story to share.
Yes, he does, for sure.
And, unfortunately, he went to Morris.
Gosh, let's not even talk about.
And for those of you who don't know, the greatest conference ever, Little Seven Conference.
Yes.
We actually were all in it. You played at Canelan, I played at Plainfield, I played at Morris. And
no, he played at Morris.
Sorry, he played at Morris. And Morris was, during our era in high school, just an absolute powerhouse in so many things.
The girls with Canelan was a powerhouse as well.
Okay. All right. Sorry. I guess
boys were a football powerhouse.
They had baseball too.
I don't care about baseball.
All right. Well, hopefully some of you do care about baseball. And even if you don't, I'm excited to share Scott's story with you. He's an incredible dude. I'm glad that we've been able to be reconnected and enjoy my interview with Scott Spiezio. Life isn't a sprint. It's a marathon. And along the way, we all stumble, learn, and keep going.
Welcome to Running Errands, a podcast about navigating marriage, parenting, business, faith, and all the unexpected detours that come along with it.
We're Justin and Sarah Aarons, partners in life, business, and raising 4 incredible kids.
For over 30 years, we've been figuring things out as we go. Sometimes successfully, and sometimes, well, not so much.
But that's the beauty of hindsight. We're here to share the lessons we've learned, the wins, the failures, and the moments that have shaped us.
Through honest conversations, special guests, and maybe even a few stories from our kids, we'll explore what it really takes to grow, adapt, and move forward.
So whether you're running a business, a household, or just running late,
you're in the right place. Let's do this together.
We're glad you're here. Welcome to Running Errands. Hey, man, when you think about your childhood, growing up around baseball, what comes to mind first?
My dad always comes to mind first because, he played 9 years in the big leagues, went to 3 World Series. He always wears a World Series ring and one of his World Series rings.
So how many series did he win?
He won 64, 67 with the Cardinals. Okay. They should have won in 68 versus Tigers. So they beat the Yankees in 64, the Red Sox in 67, went up against Detroit in 68. Had it won in Game 5.
Yeah.
Brock didn't slide. They called him out. He was safe. And then they lost that game, lost Game 6. Kurt Flood slipped in Game 7. Ball went over his head, and they ended up losing. Otherwise, they'd had 3, which is I always tell, Cubs fans, like, hey, another 108 years, you guys will tie me and my dad. They got
easy.
But yeah, that's definitely it. Because we had stations in the basement from 3 years old. I started doing stations. He had me hitting off a balance beam and balls on a rope, taking ground balls off the wall. And then we had 2 mounds in the backyard, and he'd pitch to me. Pretty much every day. Weekends we'd go hit hard balls in the backyard. We hit tennis balls. The weekends we'd hit hard balls, and my mom would play second base. And
wow,
it was kind of cool.
I don't know this about you. Are you the only child, or do you have siblings?
I have 2 older sisters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They were both tennis players, and really good, really good students. My dad basically said, "Hey, you're either going to be a major leaguer or you're going to be valedictorian." Well, my sisters took that route. I took the baseball route. Yeah.
So obviously, as a kid, it sounds like you knew no different. But just for the listeners, right now, I'm in the man cave.
Yeah, the man
cave.
And
there's just piles of incredible pictures of your career, but also you as a kid. This one here is you at Wrigley Field. How old do you think you were there?
I think I was 10 years old. I think I'm almost positive my mom still had the program. So this was a mid-season. This was a mid-season crosstown classic before they had interleague play. It was actually taken before Wrigley had lights.
Wow.
And I want to say it was 82 is when it was. I was born September 72. And the funny thing is, in the picture, Tony La Russa's one of the coaches, I don't know if he was manager yet, but he's one of the coaches, and he's in a few of the pictures. And then, years later, 2006, I'm playing for him, and we're winning a World Series together.
That's
kind of
incredible.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was really neat. There was multiple times where my dad, this picture is me and Stan Musial, sitting in the dugout in
Legend.
St. Louis. There's one on the flip side that is me and Bob Uecker.
No way.
Bob Uecker and Bruce Sutter.
That is
and
hilarious.
This is Dave LaPointe. So pretty neat stuff.
Yeah.
There's ones of me and Lou Brock and Orlando Cepeda and Bobby Tolan and, a bunch of guys.
All the legends. What position did your dad play? I don't know that.
So my dad came up as a third baseman.
Okay.
Unfortunately, so he signed out of Lewis University, 63.
Chris Priest's alma mater, Lewis University as well.
They're both numbers are retired there.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, pretty neat. So and Chris was before my dad, which is pretty cool.
Wow.
And then of course Gordy Gillespie, Irish O'Reilly, I think are the four. There might be one more.
So just for our listeners, really quick. So were you born in Joliet?
I was born in Joliet.
Okay, so Joliet has a great tradition of high school sports, pro athletes coming out of there.
Yes.
One of our mutual connections was one of my best friends, Chris Priest, who actually my son's middle name is Chris to honor Chris.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he also was a fantastic player. He was in the Angels. I believe he was in the Angels. No, Twins. It's Twins organization. That's right. Yeah. Twins organization. And then he ended up getting cancer and dying, unfortunately. But
yes,
he was a legend at Lewis too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolute legend. And we played together at Ingles Park. He was an incredible dude. I know he would have continued. He always succeeded. He was just one of those guys that he just outworked everybody.
He's a grinder.
Yeah, exactly. But my dad went to Lewis. He went to 2 years at Illinois. Then he went to Lewis. They had Gordy Gillespie, who was a legendary coach, and a lot of the guys on my dad's team ended up being great coaches. Pat Sullivan, Tony Delgado, Tom Deeden.
Oh my God!
List goes on and on.
Yeah.
So then they went to the NAI World Series 2 years there. My dad signed after his senior year, 63 by 64. He's in the World Series. It's kind of crazy.
As a kid, I mean, again, it sounds like it's all you knew, but do you remember back then? Did you realize, or did your dad try to help you realize that it was a special thing, or how did you take it as a kid? Like, this is just my dad, and he's a big leaguer.
Oh, yeah, with my dad.
Yeah.
I didn't really understand it until I was 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Maybe 9. And then I used to I remember because when he was with the White Sox, they had red hats.
Mm-hmm.
So I was always confused. Like, did you play for the Red Sox or for the White Sox? I really didn't know the leagues. Dave Wolen, who was another guy that was on my team, he was a big Cubs fan, and so he was really into, like, all right, these are the standings. This is, and so I actually learned more through him about baseball, and then I started telling people, like, if there was a pickup game, we're like, my dad's a big leaguer, my dad played in the major leagues,
well, why not?
Yeah,
yeah.
So I slowly started learning. I did know that he knew a lot. And then it was really cool, like when we go to, 10-year reunions for the 64, 67, 68 teams, and seeing his teammates and, having them give me advice. That was cool. Or having people come up and ask him for his autograph. Around Morris, you didn't get that. But you go to St. Louis and, people were all over. They still will go down there and people will be like, Ed, they won't know who I am. They'll know who he is.
Well, so, I mean, what kind of dad was your dad? Like, from a sports standpoint, was he, did he have expectations of you, or was this just kind of the way he connected with you, or?
Well, he had expectations of me. Yeah. He's like, you're either going to be a major leaguer or you're going to get straight A's the rest of your life. I remember, between him and his teammates, it was always, hey, it's easy to get to the big leagues. It's hard to stay there. There's only been 23,500 ever since 1876, which is hard to believe.
Yeah.
And 2% make it 10 years. The median is less than a year. So most of the guys that get there don't play over a year, and so between those guys, they'd always be like, you're not competing against the guys from from your hometown. You're not competing against the guys from Illinois. You're competing against the guys from California, Texas, Florida, Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Cuba, Puerto Rico, now Japan, South Korea. And so, I used to have, and I actually found it. I could show you a picture later. I used to write down my goals for every year. And a lot of times they were stats for me. That worked for me. Some people that doesn't work for. But I'd write down my 2 previous years and then what I predicted for the next year. And I found that at my dad's store, like it was taped up from my senior year of high school. That's
amazing.
Yeah. But that's what I always did. I'd pray, I'd go I'd say, God, let me, keep my family safe, keep me safe and healthy. Let me play 10 years in the big leagues and let me win a World Series. That was my prayer every night. And then I'd look at my headboard and say, what did I do today that got me closer to those goals? If it was nothing, then I worked doubly hard the next day. And so that's what he did. He pushed me. He's like, if you choose this, then you better have you've done your station work before I get home. You play with your friends after school, but make sure you're ready by 5 o'clock because I'm going to be home. I'm going to throw to you. And then, after an hour and a half, I'll go golf and you can go play again. On the weekends, you always make sure you give me a slot because we're going to go down to a field and take ground balls everywhere, fly balls. He's like, you're going to learn every position. You're going to learn how to switch hit. So I was switch hitting. People are like, when did you start switch hitting? I'm like, as soon as I picked up a bat. He forced me to.
So your dad was using all of his just experience to give you the best opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He knew. He always said, I know what it takes to get there and stay there, which is the tougher part.
Yeah.
Staying there because they make new crops every year.
Yeah.
There's always somebody, now when my dad came in, there was 16 teams. Wow. Now there's 30. So when he came in, it was very, very tough to make it and stay there.
Yeah.
And when he came up, and I was starting to talk about that earlier, when he came up, he played third base and the guy playing third for the Cardinals was Ken Boyer. He was the MVP of the National League, So one of the things my dad's like, you're going to play every position so that if you need to move, you can move. And he goes, you're going to switch hits so they can never have an excuse to pull you out of lineup. You just switch. That's so, yeah, he had me prepared for that. And then also, probably by the time I was 10, 11, 12 years old, he started getting into the mental game with me, breathing control, slowing everything down, being able to control my heart rate, basically getting into the zone, creating triggers to get into the zone. The difference between the subconscious and conscious mind, how powerful the conscious or the subconscious mind is, visualization, all that stuff. He'd always say, your subconscious can't tell the difference between a real or imagined image. The more you visualize yourself succeeding, the more confidence you're going to build. And so that's a tool. And I kept using it over and over and over. I'd visualize myself at a young age hitting home runs. When I got to the big leagues, I'd visualize myself getting my first hit. So when I got to the playoffs, later on, I didn't feel nerves. I felt like I'd been there a million times in my mind.
I love that.
Yeah.
So you would say you have a good relationship with your dad?
Yes. Well, and we'll probably
we'll get there. Yeah. Obviously, before your big moments, there was years of grinding, I'm sure. So we're at U of I for 4 years?
3 years.
Okay. And then you entered the draft?
Yeah, well, yeah.
I mean, how was it back then?
You don't really have to enter the draft.
Yeah.
They picked me. I thought I was going to go like top 3 rounds. I ended up going to 6th round.
Okay.
Which, I was kind of upset about. But, in hindsight, I got picked by Oakland. Oakland at that time didn't have a ton of money. So they didn't hold on to their free agents. So that meant like you could climb the ladder pretty fast. So right away, like I think I got drafted in June. They didn't want to give me much. I always say they wanted to give me like a book of McDonald's gift certificates, And so I went to the Cape Cod League and was killing it. They came back with what I wanted. And I went, and within a month, I went from short season A. I skipped everything to high A. Finished that season there. I was only 20 years old still. Yeah, we won our first round of playoffs. These guys all went to a bar to celebrate they wouldn't let me in because I was only 20.
Right.
Jason Giambi was on that team.
Oh, wow.
And some other really great players. So then the next year I stayed there in Modesto. Then the next year I went to AA for a year, Huntsville, Alabama. Then went to Edmonton, Alberta, Canada for AAA, Pacific Coast League. They had, pretty much all-star all years. Led the team, always hit third pretty much. That year in AAA, had 20 home runs. Me and Poppy and Todd Walker were all the top leaders. It was Big Poppy, David Ortiz.
Yeah.
We were all the leaders in the offensive category in Pacific Coast League that year. I had 20. And then we won the Pacific Coast League championship. I had 6 home runs, and I want to say it was like 5 games or 6 games. I didn't know if they'd call me up. They ended up calling me up on Friday the 13th.
So what's that like? Like, how did that work? Like, do you remember that moment?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So what's crazy, I wasn't a big drinker.
Yeah.
And like, I didn't even like taking aspirin or anything. I was the dare guy through, my whole, like, in high school. I went and talked to my grade school. In college, I went and talked to high schools, so on and so forth. So after we won, the guys were like, hey, come on, you got to go out with us, And I'm like, well, they didn't call me up after the game, so I'm guess they're not calling me up.
Yeah.
So I was kind of upset. So occasionally, if somebody like really begged me, I'd be like, all right, I'll go. And I'd usually have a beer or maybe 2.
Yeah.
That was it. And so it was probably 2 a.m. I went back to the room and I get a call, and I think it's one of my teammates. They're like, hey, Spiez, this is Jonesy. Hey, congratulations, you're going to the show. And I'm like, whatever.
You're thinking they're messing with you.
I thought, yeah, because they used to do that all the time. They'd be like, hey, Spiez, this is Jonesy. I forgot my toothpaste and toothbrush. And it would be like Mark Aker or somebody like that on my team. And so I really thought it was a prank. And then I could tell in his voice, like, it wasn't a joke. So he goes, yeah, you're meeting the team. You're meeting the A's in Cleveland, which was like an all-star team at that time. So this is September 13th. Now it's September 13th. We won on September 12th. So it's Friday 13th. We're playing the Indians in 1996. They were an all-star team. So he's like, you got to get all your stuff. Go, I'll have somebody meet you at the stadium to get your stuff out of the clubhouse, your equipment. So I had like 5 suitcases and an equipment bag, and I have to take a cab. The airport's about an hour away. I had no sleep. I called my parents. I called my wife. I was calling, like Wolen, my high school coaches. They're all like, what are you waking us up for? My high school coach got my dad and my dad was at the playoffs in Edmonton with my mom. So they had just gotten home. And then my high school coach like, we got to go to Cleveland. And it was horrible thunderstorms. I finally get on the plane like at 6 a.m. You got to go through, passport, all that stuff. I get on a prop plane. I'm flying through a thunderstorm. I'm losing hours, on Friday the 13th. I get to Cleveland and they're like, all right, you got to go straight to the field. So I get in the cab, go to the field. They let me out in front of the field. I'm like, how do I get in here? So I'm walking around. Finally, somebody like sees me, brings me into the clubhouse, and they give me number 13 on Friday the 13th. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So now you got McGuire and like all these, Terry Steinbach, Mike Bordick, Scott Brocious, like all these huge.
And you not met any of them before.
I had met them in spring training.
Okay.
But definitely didn't know them.
Yeah.
And so I was in the lineup. My dad and my coach made it. We ended up getting rained out. Oh. Next day we played 2 games. First game they don't play me. Second game I'm playing third, and you're looking at guys like Albert Bell and Tome and Manny Ramirez and Omar Vizquel and Kenny Lofton. Yeah. Guys that can bunt, guys that can kill you, down at third base. So I'm playing third, and I remember before the game I said, hey, Mac, McGuire, I said, hey, you got any advice for me? And he goes, yeah. He goes, from home to first is 90 feet. From home to the pitching mound is 60 feet, 6 inches. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I've been playing this game a long time. And he goes, that's exactly it, man. You know how to play this game. It's the same game. Just take the crowd out of it. It was great advice. So I get up, and I'm actually facing Chad Auger, who took me out on my recruiting trip to LSU.
Wow.
Which is crazy. I end up hitting hitting a shot to right field. Manny Ramirez cuts it off. So I thought it was going to be a double, but it was wet, so it kind of checked up and got a single after the.
So your first at bat, you get a
first
hit.
at bat, I get a line shot.
Yeah.
So they take the ball, they throw in the dugout, and after the inning, McGuire comes and brings him my glove, and he goes, "Nice hit, kid." And I said, "Thanks, Mac." And he goes, "Nowhere to go but down now." I'm like, "Hey, let me,
enjoy this moment."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it was crazy. The next day, I got 2 hits off Oral Hershiser, and he said, he goes, "It's not that easy, kid. They're gonna figure you out." And it's true. He loved like kind of messing with me.
Yeah.
Which was kind of fun. It was.
I mean, one of the greatest pitchers of all time messing with you.
McGuire, the first baseman, home run hitter. He was unbelievable. But yeah, he ended up, freezing my suit one time. I had to wear a dress on the plane. It was between him and some of the other veterans, man. They used to pick on me, which was I ended up doing it to rookies down the road.
All right, so you're in Oakland, and then what was the pinnacle of that experience?
Yeah, so I had played third base the whole time in the minor leagues. I'm in spring training in '97. I'm like, man, I want to try to make this team. I don't care. I can play any position. My only position I couldn't play is catcher.
Yeah.
So I'm in Oakland, and Art Howe brings me in spring training. He says, "Hey, man, we're thinking about doing something here. Did you ever play second base?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I play second base all the time." He's like, "Okay, great, because you're gonna play in the B game at 10 o'clock. So be ready." He goes, "Hey, if anything happens, anybody says anything, just send them to me." I'm like, "That's weird." Okay, well, the reality is I had only played about three games in American Legion ball.
Yeah.
When I was probably 14 years old.
Second
14,
base.
That's it. But I did practice it a lot with my dad hitting me ground balls and my mom acting like the shortstop.
Yeah.
So I knew how to feed. I knew how to take ground balls there, throw to first. It was, there were some things I needed to work on, but I knew it for the most part. So I do well at second base. That B game, I go to the A game is at 1, they end up putting, I didn't get there right at the beginning, but I got there about halfway through. They put me at third for the last 3 innings. I finish the game. I go into the clubhouse and the media just swarms me. I'm like, what is going on? They said, "How does it feel to be named the everyday starting second baseman?" I'm like, "Who told you that?" They said, "Art Howe told us." And Billy Beane just released Brent Gates, who was from Minnesota. He went to Minnesota.
You know what? I didn't even think about this. You were on a team with Billy Beane.
Well, he was my GM. Yeah.
Okay.
So Moneyball. I kind of lived that. Yeah. So they ended up releasing Brent. We had a guy named Ron Washington who was an incredible infield coach. And so I just every day at 6 in the morning, I'd get out there for the last 2.5 weeks of the season or the spring training. We'd work from 6 to 8 on turn double plays, on everything, cutoff relays, you name it, bunt plays, everything. And he's like, "Hey, man, it's either you do it or you don't. If you don't do it, they're going to send you back down. You're going to go back to third."
Yeah.
And that kind of took pressure off me. Like, hey, I can either do this or not. I'm going to give it everything I got if I can't. And that year I ended up leading the American League in fielding percentage. I had only 7 errors in 149 games or something like that. I'd gotten hit in the hand. Otherwise, I would probably played every game. I was on the DL for 15 days. Was in the All-Star game rookie home run hitting contest with Nomar Garciaparra, Scott Rowland, Jose Guillen, and me, hitting in front of 60,000 at Cleveland, which was crazy.
That had to feel amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. So it was a really good year. I ended up hitting 14 home runs. I think I drove in 60 RBIs. And then next year I was doing great, and then I got hurt. I hurt my knee. They had to do surgery, a meniscus. Came back in 5 weeks, was just way too quick. Finished with the.
Were you nervous that would lose your spot?
Yeah, okay. That's the way I was taught. Like, don't get Wally pipped, which is the guy who Lou Gehrig took his spot, and then Lou Gehrig set the record for the most consecutive games played. So, and the other thing that everybody always said is you can't make the club in the tub, So meaning you can't be in the training room all the time and make the club. So like I wanted to get back quick, and I probably came back too quick. But I still ended up with a good year. The next year they tried to make me miss arbitration, and I got really upset with them. They were trying to save money. They sent me down for a little bit. I tore it up. They brought me back up, and I tore it up for the last month or month and a half, and made arbitration by 5 days. And then they didn't want to pay the money, so they let me become a free agent, and that's how I signed with the Angels.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So how far from that point to the World Series?
Well, so that would have been 2000, my first year. So I played in the big leagues end of 96 through 99 with the A's. I was close. It was the last two teams was the Cubs or the Angels. And then Japan was in the mix too, because they were offering a lot of money. 2000 was my first year there. By 2002 was the World Series. So when I first got there, they put me at DH, and I only played half the time. I still hit 17 home runs, which was pretty good, and like 280, around 280 at bats. I kept trying to get Mike Scioscia to play me at a position, but we were pretty stacked. And we had Troy Gloss at third. We had Mo Vaughn at first. Yeah, we were a really good team. So at least I got some numbers. The next year, Mo got hurt, and I kept saying, let me play. They brought in Wally Joyner, who was a veteran. He didn't do well. Then they tried this young kid. He didn't do well. So at the All-Star break, they let me start playing first base. And so the next 2.5 years, I played first base. First year and a half, I think I only made one error in the year and a half at first. Okay. Led the league in fielding percentage at first. In 2002, which was the World Series year, that year I broke out. I hit 285, had 83 RBIs, and 14 home runs in that year. I think 16 the next year with 82 RBIs and 270. So those 2 years were my best 2 years. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, in the playoffs is when I kind of went off and did really well. I went from,
let's talk about the 2002 World Series, right?
Yeah.
So walk me through this. So Game 6.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's crazy. Going into the playoffs, nobody on the Angels roster. We had some guys that weren't on the roster, had been in the playoffs before, but they were taken off for the playoffs. But nobody on the roster had ever been in the playoffs. So, and of course, we're playing the Yankees right off the bat, going to Yankee Stadium. We ended up losing the first game, and I had a play that I usually make. It went off my glove, and it was off. Giambi hit it to me. And it was a hit, but the next guy hit a home run. It was Bernie Williams hit a home run. We end up losing it. I go back to my hotel, and there's a message. And I'd always put an alias, on my phone. So somebody gave this guy my number, and he's like, "You suck. You blew it," And I felt it just this rant for 2 minutes long. And so I'm like, "Man, he's right. I did," And then I just kind of looked at myself. Wait a second. I still got a pen. I can write a great ending. The next game, Andy Pettis pitching, first at bat, boom, I hit a home run. And then I got hot all the way through the playoffs. So going into Game 6 of against the Giants and Barry Bonds, we're down 3-2. And I was told later is they had already put plastic. Like we were down 5-0, down 3-2. They had already put plastic in the Giants clubhouse cover in their lockers. They already had the champagne out on ice. They were unveiling the trophy. People were leaving. Nobody had ever come back from that big of a deficit in an elimination game before. Yeah. And so, and as a matter of fact, so I'm coming up in the 7th inning. There's one out. Gloss gets a base hit. Brad Fulmer gets a base hit. I'm coming up. Dusty Baker walks out. Russ Ortiz, who was the starting pitcher, had done a great job. And I'm a switch hitter. I see there's two guys, a righty and a lefty, warming up. And so I'm like, what's he going to do? Is he going to leave him in? He's doing well. Or is he going to take him out? And who's he going to bring in? So I'm watching. He takes the game ball from Russ. So now I'm thinking, okay, he's out. Who's he going to bring in? So Russ starts walking away. He pats him in the butt. Russ starts walking away, and then he calls him back. Russ turns back around. He comes back, and he gives him the game ball. to me, what that meant is he thinks this game's over. Like, he's giving him a souvenir. So it pissed me off. Like, I'm like, these guys think it's over, you know. And the inning before too, the top half of the seventh, Jeff Kent got a broken bat single that drove in a run and was like doing this. And then too, I'm like, these guys think it's over, you know. It pissed. So both those things I used as motivation. They ended up bringing a righty, Felix Rodriguez, throwing 96 and 97, you know, on the old gun, which on the new gun is is probably 100, 101, you know. And so I just kept saying, man, if I could just get something started here. I knew that our team had come back 8 times that year, and we had a thing called the Rally Monkey that really helped the fans get in the game. And we used that the 7th inning on. And I got behind 1 and 2 right away. And I just kept fouling pitches off. I ended up getting to the 8th pitch. I had fouled 4 pitches off. I was 3-2, and he threw one down and in, and I hit it. And I knew I hit it on the barrel, but I knew I hit it high. So it was, if you ever seen the movie The Natural, like everything kind of slowed down. Everything was in slow motion. When I get in the zone, I don't hear noise anyway, but it was deathly quiet. It was like running in slow motion. I could hear my breath, and I'm like praying, like, God, please let this go out. I see Reggie Sanders going back to the wall. He hits the wall, and I'm past first base. And I see him hit the wall. I see the ball go over his head. And only time in my career, you know, I had 122 home runs if you count the playoffs in the major leagues. Only time I ever like showed emotion. I just went boom like that. And then it was like the loudest noise I ever heard in my life. The place just erupted, you know, and the momentum shifted. And I got around everybody in my dugout. And, you know, Gloss and Fulmer were all pumped up. The whole dugout, everybody was pumped up. And we ended up coming back and winning that game. And it's, you know, my dad used to end every practice with 3-2 count, 2 outs, bases loaded, down 1, bottom of 9, game 7 of the World Series. What are you going to do? And my mom would be shagging balls saying, do it for the ring, Scott. And so when I was going around those bases, it was like I was reliving all those moments. And now it wasn't game 6, but it felt the same, you know. So we ended up winning that game. We win game 7. I ended up scoring the first run for us in game 7. I had 19 RBIs, which tied the record for the most RBIs in a playoff season. And then all of a sudden I started getting bombarded. You know, this was like right after this picture was right after we won it. And it's funny because my dad told me 2 things. When you win it, don't get on the bottom of the pile, right here. And he goes, take your hat off and hold on to your glove because fans might run onto the field and grab it. And looking at old footage, that's what they did during his. So it's funny. Every time we win, he's like, don't get on the bottom of the pile. You'll get hurt, and take off your hat. So every time we win, you'll see me with my hat in my hand and my glove, you know, still on my hand and outside the pile. The other great thing is you get on your picture, right? If you're on the bottom of the pile, you don't get
buried. Yeah,
get buried, man. Yeah. You got to remember that. But yeah, it was an amazing moment. Then I started, like, right away, they're like, they did the commercial like, hey, you just won the World Series, where are you going to go? And we're like, we're going to Disneyland, you know. And then it was Dave Letterman wants you to do the top 10 list, you know. Jay Leno wants you on the show tonight. Monday Night Football wants you on. Carson Daly wants you on. Wayne Brady wants you on the show. They want you to be on this sitcom called She Spies. Yes, dear, like all these things. And I've
always wondered what that has to be. It may be initially exciting, but that has to be overwhelming, right?
Oh yeah, it was. I mean, I always say, you know, I'm a kid from the middle of the cornfields. You know, I'm 60 miles southwest of Chicago, but we're still out here in the middle of nowhere. You know, pretty naive. And then all of a sudden you're in Southern California. And like I said, I wasn't the big star. I was a good player, but I wasn't the star. And now all of a sudden I'm thrust in the spotlight, you know. And then they wanted my band to play on the Best Damn Sports Show, period. And I'm playing with all these famous rock stars, you know, Ozzy Osbourne's guitar player, Alice in Chains bass player, Rob Zombie's drummer. And it was just nuts. I'm hanging out with all these rock stars and actors and actresses. And I just kind of got pulled away from like my normal routine. And it was my agent would call and say, here's another thing. And, I was tired because, you play 162 games, you play, 40 or so in the spring training, and then you play in, 15 or 16 in the playoffs.
Yeah.
In the playoffs, it's like magnified by 1,000 each game because the media is just nuts. So it's an emotional drain, and it's, of course, physically you're tired. So yeah, it was incredibly overwhelming, and kind of was the start of like pulling me out of like my normal routine. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity too, I don't know this, but when something incredible happens in sports and you see them all on those late night shows, do you just do that for the publicity and for fun, or do they pay you for that stuff?
You do it because the team wants you to do it, but also, I was a huge Dave Letterman fan and Leno fan. It's a lot different than it is now. Of course, it's become a little bit more political now. And plus there wasn't social media. So like everybody watched those shows.
Right.
First thing they said is, do you want to do Letterman's top 10 list? I'm like, are you kidding me? Who else? And they're like, just you. I'm like, what? Yeah, it was fun. And then all of it was really fun. And then it started getting tiring. And then I did start saying no to stuff because it was just too much for me. Flying to New York, flying to California, I couldn't even, at that point now, I couldn't even go. I tried to go trick-or-treating with my friend. There was people dressed as me trick-or-treating. I couldn't go to Disneyland, which I had been to for the last 3, because we were owned by Disney at the time. I couldn't even go to Disneyland. I had been there a million times. Nobody said anything. Now all of a sudden I couldn't walk. It was crazy.
So what kind of toll did that take on like your family, but also like you internally?
Yeah. So my family, I think, I thought it was great. It just, like I said, like usually I'd get home, take a week, 10 days off, and then I'd start training again. Like my training got delayed. I was, kind of a spiritual guy. So like I used to read the Bible on the road. I got away from doing that. There was a lot of my routine I got away from. And then I always say, like, I was very humble, but man, when you get a lot of people telling you how good you are, that ego can kick in. And for me, that, as a Christian, now I call that edging God out. So I started edging God out, and that ended up really being a huge part of, eventually why I fell. Yeah.
So I think, a lot of people remember that moment, right? Of that game.
Oh yeah.
But very few people know that, kind of what you're talking about is sort of the toll that could take on you. So, what were some of the things that started creeping up? Like, was it loneliness because, your life has changed so much, or is it expectations, or?
I would say my routines got messed up. That was the biggest thing. I was getting pulled away from my family a lot, getting pulled away from my training, getting pulled away from my faith. A lot of temptations flowing around you. With the Angels, I had a really good group of guys around me. Tim Salmon, Garrett Anderson, who we just unfortunately lost. We're all devastated. We still can't believe it happened. Orlando Palmeiro, David Eckstein, Benji Molina. I had those guys. So like they were still helping me like stay afloat. But like I started kind of losing what I was playing for. Now I'm thinking like, okay, what do I play for? I just won the World Series. Like this is what I prayed for my whole life, So what am I playing for? I started playing for like long-term deal. So I started playing, in essence for money, which I never played for. I could care less what I made. That just happened. And so the 2003 was kind of a long season. I had a great season, but I thought, okay, they're going to end up, giving me, more a long-term deal. They ended up doing the opposite. I had 2 of the best years ever, felt like I contributed a great deal to us winning the World Series. And then they're asking me to take half, to cut my salary in half on a 1-year deal and my playing time in half. And I'm like, what?
Is that because of age, or?
So no, what they had, later, I understand it. I didn't realize that they were going to bring in another center fielder and move Erstad because his legs were starting to get older. They were going to move him to first. It ended up working out. He ended up winning the Gold Glove at first. But they kind of started dismantling that team, which is too bad. I thought we would stay together for a long time, but we didn't. They brought in a lot of guys. A lot of guys ended up leaving. So that was disheartening. But then I ended up having a lot of offers. One of the offers was Seattle, and um, and then they wanted a 3-year guaranteed deal with a 4th-year team option, and if they didn't take it, then it was a buyout. So it was more money than I had made by far. I mean, I made a lot in 2003, but that was probably my highest single season. But now I had 3 years with a buyout that were pretty close.
Yeah.
And guaranteed money. So I'm like, all right, my family's going to be set, and then that's where I went into spring training and got hurt. Then I on a play at the mound, a pop up. I went back to third, playing third for them. Went on a pop up to the mound, hit the mound. Didn't know it at the time, but ended up blowing out my T6 and T7 disc, my thoracic discs in my back. They basically told me that if I tried to play, I could go paralyzed because more fluid could come out. And I went to 6 doctors in spring training. They all said the same thing. One of them said I'd have to wait till June, see if my body absorbed the fluid naturally, and then they would go in, collapse my lung, take out a rib, go in and big reinforce along my spine. And they're like, there's a 5% chance that you could be paralyzed. It was awful. Like, I started getting depressed, like, and I'm like, I can't even hold my kids,
Wow.
And so I just started I kind of got mad at God. I started saying, like, I've been good this whole time, and and I don't even get to have fun like I just see all these other guys doing all these crazy things. And so I kind of went down in a dark hole, and I didn't have those guys that I had around yet, because I'd only been in spring training, a month or so before it happened, and I hadn't established that group of guys around me. And so then I'm dealing with that, and I'm wanting to play. I kept going to doctors until one of them finally said, "Hey, your spinal cord's thick enough. I think that even if more fluid comes out, it's not going to paralyze you." So he said, "If you can stand the pain, you can play," which is the worst thing he could have told me, because then I'm like, all right, I'm playing, which I shouldn't have done that year. I had multiple doctors after that year tell me you're stupid to play. But I ended up playing. The problem is I was traveling with the team and not playing at the beginning. And a couple of guys were like, "Hey, Spiez, we haven't even got to know you, man. Come down to the hotel bar." And I went down and was sipping my normal beer, and they started throwing out, mixed cocktails in front of me. And I'd be halfway done with one, another one come, and it helped me deal with depression, and anxiety. And I started liking it, and the problem with me is when I drink a lot, especially hard liquor, I start making bad decisions, and that's what happened. I started making bad decisions, 4 drinks turned to 8 next night, 16 next night, who knows the next night. And I got to the point where I was so far away from who I was that I didn't know who I was anymore. Started, up having an affair. I ended up going through a divorce. I played that year, didn't have a great year, 215, 10 home runs, 40-something RBIs. It was bad. It was tough. And ended up going through the divorce in the offseason, remarried to a girl from Southern California who wasn't a really good influence on me. She was a Playboy model, and so what every kid thinks they want, but I had a great family. I totally messed it up because of the drinking and the depression, and instead of I didn't really know how to deal with it. People were like, go to counselors, and I would always say, no, that's for weak people, but I should have, and I ended up blowing that relationship, and then because of that, I kind of used that as an excuse to keep drinking, And then after the next year with Seattle, I hardly ever played, and so now I wasn't playing. So her and I, I remarried this girl. Her and I would go out every night and go to clubs, and just we're blowing money like crazy. Shopping, going on trips. That off season, we're going on trips, and then that off season, I'm over 33 years old. I get released, um, and uh, November of 2005. We were out, and her and one of my friends introduced me to a drug.
Mm-hmm.
First time I'd seen a drug in my life, and I'm over 33 years old, and I did it, and I was like, "Oh, it's not that bad," and that's how it gets you. And then
Right.
all of a sudden, I was dabbling with it. I thought my career was over. My parents and I stopped talking. My family stopped talking because my parents were like, I can't watch you go, make these bad decisions. When you decide you're going to stop doing that, then we're here for you.
Yeah.
So I used that as a reason to keep using and drinking. And I thought my career was over, and I was actually here in Morris February 17th, 18th. Spring training had already started. I thought I was done. There's something banging on my window. I go look, through the drapes, and it was a cardinal banging on my window. I'm like, that is weird. About 15 minutes later, my agent calls and says, "Hey, the Cardinals want to invite you to spring training."
No way.
Yeah, as a minor league invitee. I'm like, okay. So I went out. A girl from my high school used to cut my hair. I said, cut my hair, and I go, hey, and I had a goatee in Anaheim, and I used to dye like a little part of it red. Then my second wife didn't like the goatee, so I just left this soul patch thing, and and so I went to her. I go, can you dye this or bleach this blonde and then dye it cardinal red? She's like, are you sure? I said, yeah. So I did it. Told my agent, and he's like, horrible idea. St. Louis is super conservative. So I went down to spring training. I said, don't worry about it, man. They're gonna love it. They ended up loving it. I got to spring training thinking I'd be number like 79. I ended up getting 26, which was my dad's number. And I started tearing up. I'm like, I started telling everybody, we're going to win the World Series. They're like, how about you make the team first before I made the team on the last day. Um, and had a really good year. I was still drinking, but like I really wasn't using any drugs. Um, and I was refocused.
Yeah.
I felt like it was my second chance, and I'm in my dad's number. But it was sad because he wasn't around, and he was always around, like all the time. Spring trainings, the only spring training he missed up until through my career was the one I got hurt. That was the only one he missed that year, the one in Seattle or in my career. And now he's not, and he was always in and out, him and my mom and my family, and now nobody's coming, and we end up towards the end of that season, I was out with some of the guys in Arizona, and they were using drugs, and they're like, do it. And I'm like, no, like I don't do it during the season, and they're like, just try it. So I did it. I hit 2 home runs the next day. Did it the next day because they're like, gotta do it again. I did it the next day. Baseball players are superstitious, So I did it the next day, had another home run double. Didn't do it the next day, struck out 3 times. And they're like, see? So I did the next day, had another home run double. And so I ended up doing it the rest of the season. And I said, well, I'll stop at the end of the season. I was super hot. We ended up winning the playoffs and in the World Series. And I had 6 RBIs. I wasn't playing every day like I did in 2002, but I was playing a lot. Had 6 big RBIs in the playoffs with the Cardinals. At the end, I thought, okay, I'll stop. But then it was like, we won, like, let's party. So it was, out to Vegas, to Aruba, to Cabo, to Puerto Vallarta, Scottsdale. It was like, her and I just went around and just started partying everywhere, and by 2000, I always say by 2007, I had given up everything in my life for 2 things, and that was drugs and alcohol. Like it had taken over my life. I couldn't, like I became so chemically dependent on it that I couldn't function without it. And one was an upper and one was a downer. So it was a constant battling.
Yeah.
And I had the money to buy it. And I didn't want to tell anybody because nobody in my family had ever dealt with it. I didn't want to lose my job. So I kept playing, and I still hit 270. but I wasn't the same player and everybody knew it. I thought I was hiding it, but everybody kind of knew. Finally, I collapsed. I want to say it was in August of that year in the dugout, and they had to put IVs in me. They didn't know if I was going to make it. I came clean to them, to Tony and Tony La Russa and Walt Jockety, our GM. They're like, we're going to get you help. It leaked somehow to the media, which was awful because I didn't get to tell people. And then they put me at a rehab center that was right outside of St. Louis. So I didn't want to share because I didn't trust anybody now.
Yeah.
You know? And Tony and Walt, to their defense, they were super mad. Like they went around hunting heads. They could never figure it out who it was. But I went there for 28 days, listened to what they said, and then came back and was in the lineup. So I thought, okay, I'm healed now, but I wasn't. You know, still a lot of stuff. The cool thing that the Cardinals did in 2007, which was kind of like the prodigal son moment, is they invited my dad to give me my ring on opening day. Well, it was actually the second game, not opening day. That's when they gave the rings out. So when I was about ready to go out, Mike Shannon, who played with my dad, was on doing the announcements, and he said, for the next player, we have a special guest presenter for the first time in history.
And he had no idea?
No idea.
Wow.
Yeah. A father-son have won the World Series with the same organization and won 2 apiece. And I'm like, I turn around and my dad's sitting there with his old jersey on, and I started bawling, you know, they call him up. And then they call me up, and I say that there's probably about 47,000 people, you know, bawling that day. So that was the restart of our relationship. Him and my mom went to rehab where I was at and went to classes for 2 days straight, took, 40 pages of notes, learned that they couldn't really hold a rope to let me kill myself, hang myself on. And it was tough. Like they were there for me. I knew it, which was great, but I still couldn't figure it out. And after the 2007 season, going into 2008, I got in a wreck. The Cardinals ended up releasing me. I tried a little stint with Atlanta, but I just wasn't in it mentally, and I was clean again. But I ended up going out one night and binging, and it ended up, like basically, I told everybody I'm done, and it was tough. So for the next, I went back and tried to play a little bit of independent ball. 2009 did well. 2010 I went to Dominican, was in the World Series. Went to Newark, played out there. Where Trevor Bauer's playing now. And I had the Marlins looking at me. So I know I could have probably played another 5-6 years in the major leagues, but I just was in a bad spot and I couldn't get out of it. So for the next, I would say 10 years, it was battle. It was a battle. I'd get sober and then relapse, sober, relapse. I went to 11 rehabs in 10 years. I was never going to give up, but man, it was hard, and then I made a smart move. I was burning through, I went through 2 divorces. You lose half to the government and then you lose over half to the first divorce, half what I had left in the second divorce. Was spending money like crazy, jumped into another relationship, had another son who's 11 now. And so the little I had left, the property here, the little bit in a funds that I had, I gave it all over to my dad and said, here, I don't want a credit card. I don't want ATM. I don't want checkbook. I don't want any cars. I sold 7 cars. And I just said, here, pay the bills. And so he used what he had and then he started using his own money once my money ran out to pay the bills. And, the good thing is it stopped me from using drugs. The bad thing is I was still able to, manipulate people to bring me alcohol, although it was cheap usually. Yeah. But I mean, I got to the point where I was driving my bike to the liquor store buying, cheap alcohol, coins, or I'd trade autograph stuff for people for cash so I could buy, it was bad. But I was slowing down. I had somebody, a girl in my life that was trying to help me. She would make me drinks and put less liquor in there. I'd be like, there's nothing in here. She's like, yes, there is, I started going back to church. I started reading the Bible again. And slowly but surely I was getting better, but I still couldn't kick it. And I think this is where God stepped in. My back started feeling really bad, so I went and got an MRI. I came out of the machine, I was totally yellow. My eyes were yellow. I was completely jaundiced.
Yeah.
They said go to the emergency room. I wouldn't go. The next day it was worse. That girl, Tanya Boyer, who it was, she's like, you're either going to go or I'm going to call everybody from Morris and they're going to drag you there and your kids. And I'm like, okay, I'll go. So I went. They're like, your organs are shutting down. Like your levels are higher than we've ever seen. Liver enzymes, like bilirubin, all these things I didn't know anything about. But Tanya did, and the doctors did, and I could see it in their eyes. They're like, and they basically said, hey, you got about a 20% chance to get through this, And so I had to have that conversation with my parents and my sisters, and hey, I want this to go to, my kids and this to go
Right,
here.
you thought you might be done?
Oh yeah. I thought, well, they said 20% chance.
Yeah.
They're like, these next 5 days are crucial. And so I'd always ask God for help, and then God would help me. And then I'd say, okay, I got it, and I'd steer off the cliff. And so I just basically cried out to God, said, all right, God, take away my cravings. If you can get me through these next 5 days. The other thing they were saying is, if you do get through 5 days, you're going to have a liver transplant. So, but they said the catch is you can't drink. Like if you drink, you can't get, so you're going to be tested. You're going to be seeing a transplant liver specialist out of Northwestern Medical. And so I made it those 5 days. I had asked God to take away that my cravings, and I just passed 8 years sobriety from that day on, which was
My God.
yeah.
Nice.
Thanks, man. It was April 6th, 2018. From that day on, I had zero cravings at all. And what's crazy, and my pastor just used it in a sermon 2 weeks ago when they were talking about addiction and stuff. He was using that story. Whenever I see alcohol now, like I get physically ill. So I feel like I'm going to throw up if I see it, which is unbelievable. Because one of the first things I thought when they said you got to go 6 months without drinking, I thought, how am I going to do that? So I went from a guy that didn't even like drinking, never saw a drug, was the dare guy. I was the I could show you the Roberto Clemente Award nominee in 2003, Dave Stewart Community Service Award in 97. That guy, to all of a sudden, I don't think I can go 6 months without drinking to save my own life. But that's where God stepped in. He took away the cravings. I kept going. I was having to go. I made it out. I got sick again. I went back in. It was tough. It was a couple really tough months. I was having to go in maybe every couple of weeks to get fluid taken out of my abdomen. 2.5 liters. So like a pop bottle and those 2 liters, like that full of fluid in my stomach. And I kept going, and they're like, all right, you're getting closer to the transplant. And I went about maybe the 4th time, and the doctor was looking at the papers, and he was looking at the scans, and he's like, I don't know how to explain it, but your numbers are all normal and your scans are normal. He goes, I've never seen anything like it. All I could say is somebody upstairs is looking out for you. And he goes, you don't have to come back anymore. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, it was another incredible miracle. Yeah. So I started really reading the Bible. I started going to church. I was still beating myself up with guilt and shame. So in the Bible, I was looking at all these people in the Bible that had done horrible things: David, Moses, Paul. And I thought, man, if God could forgive them and he can use them, then he can forgive me and use me. And so I just started going out in my yard and picking up sticks because my yard looked horrible. So I started picking up sticks that first day. And then second day I had a burn pile, and then I could mow, and it started like that. And then I started going to my kids' games and things like that, and started going out in public, and, started being more involved in church, and little by little I was able to pull through, and eventually I don't want to jump ahead, but, started, I got asked during COVID, I got asked to manage a team for the Joliet Slammers. Kind of reignited that love for baseball and coaching kids. I didn't know if I'd like coaching, but I did. I should say kids. I mean, they're 20, 20
Yeah.
20 to
Young
30
adults.
yeah, 20 to 30-year olds. I had another buddy that two buddies that came and were doing Bible studies with me. I took one of them, and he was my assistant coach, and we started a Bible study for the 4 teams that were playing in that league, and it was really cool. And then I started doing a Rooted series at my church, joined the men's group, started my own life group, and it just started. Then people started asking me to train because I had the facility because everything was shut down.
Yeah.
So I was doing training here, and I started with 1 kid, then it went to 2, then it went to 4, then it went to 8, then all of a sudden, probably 500-600 over the last 6 years. So it's been really cool. Of course, rekindled that relationship with my parents. So I always say it's the prodigal son moment with my dad and my heavenly Father. And so now I started teaching. I started talking to high schools and grade schools. I talk at churches. I talk at banquets and things like that. And now we got a book and a documentary coming out here soon.
Yeah.
The documentary started out as just something we want to do and maybe put on YouTube, but we started getting a lot of really good feedback. And so we entered it into some film festivals. It's basically it's just my life story. And then of course it's got a Christian tint to it. And so we entered it into some, and it was selected to be in the International Christian Film Festival in Orlando this year. It was picked to be screened, which is pretty good to have that happen. And then our director was nominated for Best Director. She didn't end up winning it, but just to be nominated is pretty cool. There's a lot that goes in it. I was talking to you about this earlier. Maybe Angel Studios, maybe Netflix, maybe Prime, who knows? And we're hoping it comes out right around World Series time. So end of October, beginning of November. The book right now, it's 26 chapters for me and my dad's number with the Cardinals. We originally planned to release it on 7/26/26 because my number at Morris was 7, my number at University of Illinois was 7, my dad's number at Lewis was 7. And we both wore 26 with the Cardinals. And it's the 20-year anniversary of our World Series with the Cardinals. It seems like I've got meetings every morning, like meetings usually from 9 to 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. And then boom, I still do lessons. So I'll start lessons here today at 3:30.
Yeah. Thanks for squeezing me in.
Oh yeah. It's great. It's awesome having you. So I'll go lessons 3:30 to only 6 today. Yesterday I went to 10. But I saw my son, so I didn't have to start until about 7. Tomorrow I'll be going 3 to 10 o'clock at night. It's still fun. I enjoy doing the one-on-one stuff.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Yeah, I should say my ghostwriter, who we've been working on this for 8 months, is Leslie Butcher. She's awesome, unbelievable, so enthusiastic, great Christian, and Shelby Kimball for the documentary. She's the producer, director, editor. She's a one-woman show. Leslie did help her in some things, but she's pretty much done everything, and she's put in just as much work. Both of them put in way more work than me.
Well, I only have 2 more questions for you. When you look back at your life now, right?
Yeah.
What are you most grateful for?
Oh, well, that's tough. I guess it's not tough. I mean, there's so many things I'm grateful for. We could be here forever. I would say my relationship with God is number 1. I always wear my bracelet that says I am second. I always want to put him first. I never want to. And then my relationship with family. Those are the 2 things I'm probably most grateful for. I have an unbelievable family. My kids are, the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I have 4 of them. It's amazing. It's not perfect. Like right now, my daughter and I are struggling with conversation. She's graduating from the University of Chicago. I'm super proud of her. She got a master's in 4 years,
Wow.
at University of Chicago, which is pretty good. She went that valedictorian route. All my kids are very smart, but I always say never give up, and so I just keep praying that relationship rekindles. I know God will has it. I'm closer with my 2 boys than ever before. I'm closer with my parents. And then my youngest, all we do is fish all the time. I don't even know how to fish, but I'm learning from him. That's all he wants to do. Life is amazing. I also really cherish friendships. I always say I had to come home because the people here, my roots knew me better than I knew myself at the time. And they helped me. They were ready to help me, and they pulled me. God and my family and my friends pulled me from the pit of despair and put my feet on solid ground. And that's, and that's the huge part is my relationship with Jesus Christ now. And now I feel my goal in life is to share my story to help people, that are suffering, to give them hope, because people they might not be addicted to drugs or alcohol, but they could be addicted to gambling or pornography or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And prescription, drugs. I've seen kids, I've seen adults as old as 80, suffering from that. So I want to give people hope, and then I want to bring people to Christ. That's, I feel like, the Great Commission. So those are the things that I'm most grateful for and what I'm planning for the future.
I love it. So you answered my second question without me even asking.
How about that?
Yeah,
I can read your mind. I have ESPN.
Bees, man. Thanks, buddy.
You bet, man. It's awesome having you down, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming out in the middle of the woods.
I love it. I love it.
Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Running Errands. We truly love having these conversations and sharing them with all of you.
If something resonated with you today, we'd be so grateful if you'd rate and review the show. It helps more people find us.
And if you know someone who'd connect with this episode, send it their way. You never know who might just need to hear it.
We'd also love to hear from you, your feedback, your stories, or even topics you'd like us to tackle next.
You can connect with us on our personal socials, the show's Facebook page, or through the website, runningerrands.today. And links are always in the show notes.
Until next time, keep showing up, stay kind, and remember,
Life's a long run, and the best way forward is together.